Cathoran had always been afraid. Ever since he was young, fear lived inside him like a second heart. Among his people, the Velothi, this made him broken. The Velothi were warriors. They were born to fight. Their bodies were tall and strong, covered in thick scales that could stop a blade. Their claws could tear through metal. Their two hearts pumped blood that burned with the desire for battle. But Cathoran was different. When other young Velothi trained for war, he hid in the corners. When they dreamed of glory, he dreamed of quiet places far from danger. His father had looked at him with shame. His mother had stopped looking at him at all. He tried to be brave. He truly did. He joined the military like all Velothi males were expected to do. He wore the armor. He carried the weapons. He stood in formation with soldiers who seemed to feel no fear at all. But when the first real battle came, everything fell apart. The Battle of Hollow Moons was supposed to be a simple mission. A small enemy force had taken control of a mining station. The Velothi were sent to take it back. Cathoran remembered standing in the dropship, his scales pale with terror, his claws shaking so hard he could barely hold his rifle. The doors opened. His squad charged forward with fierce battle cries. And Cathoran ran, but not toward the enemy. He ran the other way. He ran until he found a cargo hold in the back of a transport ship. And he hid there like a scared animal while his brothers and sisters fought and died. They found him 2 days later, curled up among the shipping containers, still shaking. The punishment was swift. The Velothi High Command stripped him of his rank. They took his family name. They branded him with the mark of cowardice, a black symbol burned into the scales of his chest where everyone could see it. And then they exiled him. He was no longer welcome on his homeworld. He was no longer Velothi in any way that mattered. For 3 years, Cathoran wandered from station to station across the galaxy. He took whatever work he could find. He fixed machines and cleaned floors and tried to make himself invisible. The shame followed him everywhere. Other Velothi would see the brand on his chest and turn away in disgust. Other species would hear the stories and look at him with pity or contempt. He ended up on Outpost 17 almost by accident. It was a joint military station on the edge of Coalition space, a place where many different species worked together. The Coalition needed technicians, and Cathoran was good with machines. It was the one thing he had always been good at. So they took him in, gave him a small room and a small job, and mostly left him alone. The outpost was a strange place. Dozens of species lived and worked there, from the tall insectoid Kryn to the small furry Talani. But the species that confused Cathoran the most was the humans. He had heard of humans before. Everyone in the galaxy had heard of humans. They were a young species, having only discovered faster than light travel a few hundred years ago. Their bodies were soft and weak. They had no claws, no scales, no natural weapons of any kind. They lived short lives, barely 100 years if they were lucky. By all logic, they should have been conquered and forgotten long ago, but they had not been conquered. Somehow, these soft little creatures had built one of the most powerful civilizations in the known galaxy. They had won wars against enemies that should have destroyed them. They had earned a seat on the Coalition Council. They walked through the universe as if they owned it. Cathoran did not understand them at all. The first human to speak to him was a female named Katie Morrison. She was a sergeant in charge of the outpost's supply division. She was small, even for a human, with dark hair pulled back tight against her head and sharp, brown eyes that seemed to notice everything. She found Cathoran on his first day, standing alone in a corridor, trying to read a map of the station on his datapad. "You're the new Velothi transfer," she said. It was not a question. Cathoran lowered his crested head, a sign of submission among his people. "Yes, I am Cathoran. I am assigned to the Technical Support Division." He waited for her to notice the brand on his chest. He waited for the look of disgust or the cruel words. But Katie Morrison just nodded. Good. We need more techs. Half our systems are held together with tape and hope. She gestured for him to follow. Come on, I'll show you where you'll be working. Catherine followed her through the winding corridors of the station. He towered over her by almost 2 feet, yet she walked ahead of him without any sign of fear or hesitation. He could have killed her with a single swipe of his claws. She did not seem to care. As they walked, he noticed other things about the humans on the station. They laughed with each other in the hallways. They made jokes and slapped each other on the back. Even when alarms would occasionally blare in the distance, signaling some minor emergency, they barely seemed to notice. You do not seem afraid, Catherine said without thinking. Katie glanced back at him. Afraid of what? He struggled to find the words. Everything. The dangers of space. The enemies beyond our borders. The 1,000 ways to die in a place like this. Katie stopped walking. She turned to face him fully, and there was something in her expression that he could not read. Oh, we're afraid, she said. Trust me, we're all afraid. We just don't let it stop us from living. She started walking again before Catherine could respond. His quarters were a small room with a bed, a desk, and a window that looked out at the stars. Katie left him there with a datapad containing his work schedule and a map of the station. Mess hall is on deck 3, she said from the doorway. Food's not great, but it's hot. We eat dinner at 1800 hours. You should come. I do not wish to intrude, Catherine said. Katie shrugged. It's not intruding if you're invited. Think about it. She left, and Catherine stood alone in his new room, more confused than ever. He did not go to dinner that night, or the next night, or the night after that. He ate alone in his quarters, ordering food from the automated dispensers. And he tried to pretend that he was content with his isolation. But sometimes, late at night, he would stand at his window and watch the humans moving through the corridors below. He would see them laughing together, arguing together, living together. And he would feel something that he did not have a name for. It was not quite loneliness. It was not quite longing. It was something in between, something that made his chest ache in a way that had nothing to do with the brand, burned into his scales. For the first time in years, Catherine wondered if there might be more to life than simply being afraid. 3 months passed on Outpost 17. Catherine fell into a quiet routine. He woke early, ate alone, and went to work in the engineering section. He fixed broken machines and checked power systems and made himself useful in the small ways that he could. Then he returned to his quarters and waited for the next day to begin. The humans would not leave him alone. It started small. A nod in the hallway. A wave from across the room. Someone holding a door open for him even though he was perfectly capable of opening it himself. These tiny acts of kindness confused him. Among the Velothi, a coward was ignored at best and attacked at worst. The humans seemed to operate by different rules. The worst of them was a young male named Lucas Brennan. He was a private first class, barely 22 years old, with messy brown hair and a smile that never seemed to fade. He worked in the same section as Catherine, maintaining the station's communication arrays. Lucas talked constantly. He talked about his family back on Earth, a planet Catherine had never seen. He talked about his training, his friends, his dreams of one day commanding his own ship. He talked about everything and nothing, and he directed most of this talk at Catherine, whether Catherine wanted to hear it or not. You ever been to Earth? Lucas asked one morning while they worked on a damaged relay. No, Catherine said. You should go sometime. It's beautiful. Blue oceans, green forests, mountains so tall they touch the clouds. Lucas handed him a tool without being asked. I'm from a place called Colorado. We have these incredible sunsets there. The whole sky turns orange and pink and purple. Why are you telling me this? Catherine asked. Lucas shrugged. Just making conversation. Gets boring in here without someone to talk to. There are many others you could talk to. Yeah, but I like talking to you. Lucas grinned at him. You're a good listener. Catherine did not know what to say to that. So he said nothing, and Lucas kept talking. And somehow the morning passed faster than usual. The invitations started soon after. Lucas would appear at Catherine's store in the evening, asking if he wanted to join a group for dinner. Katie Morrison would see him in the hallway and remind him about social gatherings in the recreation room. Even the station's commander, a stern woman named Megan Price, stopped him once to ask if he was settling in well. Catherine refused every invitation. He made excuses. He was tired. He had work to do. He was not feeling well. The humans accepted his excuses without argument, but they kept asking. One evening, Lucas showed up at his quarters with a deck of cards. Come on, he said, pushing past Catherine into the room. I'm going to teach you how to play poker. I did not invite you in, Catherine said. I know. But you were going to sit here alone again, and that's just sad. Lucas sat down at the small desk and started shuffling the cards. It's a human game. Very simple. You'll pick it up fast. I do not gamble. We're not gambling. We're just playing. Lucas dealt out cards with practiced ease. It's about reading people, figuring out what they're thinking. Good skill to have. Catherine stood by the door for a long moment. He could tell Lucas to leave. He could make him go, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the loneliness he had been feeling. Maybe it was curiosity about this strange human who would not give up on him. He sat down across from Lucas. Show me, he said. Lucas's smile grew even wider. Now we're talking. They played for 2 hours. Catherine lost every hand. He did not care. For the first time in longer than he could remember, he was not alone. The days grew warmer after that. Not the temperature on the station, which was always the same, but something inside Catherine. He started eating in the mess hall sometimes, sitting at the edge of the human tables. He started responding when people greeted him. He even laughed once at a joke Lucas told, and the sound surprised him so much that he forgot to be embarrassed. He was still afraid. The fear never left him, but it felt smaller somehow, less heavy, as if the weight of it was being shared. Then the Kreth came. The Kreth swarm had been a distant threat for years. They were a species of hive-minded predators, creatures that existed only to consume and expand. They had devoured dozens of worlds on the outer edges of known space. Coalition intelligence said they were focused far away, busy with other targets. Coalition intelligence was wrong. Catherine was in the engineering bay when the attack began. He was working on a routine maintenance task, checking the calibration of a sensor array. Lucas was nearby, telling another one of his endless stories. Katie Morrison was at a console across the room, reviewing supply requests. The first impact knocked Catherine off his feet. The station shook like a living thing. Alarms began to scream. The lights flickered and went red. Through the reinforced windows, Catherine could see them. Ships, but not ships. Living things, massive organic structures covered in chitin and claws, swarming toward the station like insects descending on prey. Battle stations, the intercom crackled. All hands to battle stations. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Catherine's body responded the way it always did. His heart raced. His scales turned pale. His legs began to shake. The fear rose up inside him like a wave, threatening to drown him. He watched the humans around him. They were afraid too. He could see it in their eyes, in the tension of their bodies. But they moved. They grabbed weapons and equipment. They called out to each other, coordinating, preparing. Chief Engineer Nathan Cole, a big man with gray in his beard, stopped at the door of the engineering bay. Everyone to emergency stations. We need all hands on the shield generators. The human engineers ran past him. Lucas paused long enough to grab Keth Oren's arm. Come on, Keth, we need you. Keth Oren could not move. His legs would not obey him. The fear had frozen him in place, just like it had at the Battle of Hollow Moons, just like it always did. I cannot, he whispered. Lucas stared at him. For a moment, Keth Oren expected anger, expected disgust, expected the look he had seen on so many Velothi faces, but Lucas just squeezed his arm. It's okay. When you're ready, come find us. Then he was gone, running toward the danger with all the other humans. Keth Oren stood alone in the empty engineering bay. The alarms kept screaming. The station kept shaking. And all he could do was stand there, paralyzed by his own cowardice. He sank down against a wall and put his head in his hands. The sounds of battle echoed through the station. People were fighting. People were dying. And he was hiding, just like he always did. The brand on his chest seemed to burn. He had thought that maybe things could be different here. That maybe the humans could help him become something more than what he was. But he had been wrong. He was still the same frightened creature he had always been. Still the coward of Velith Prime. Still worthless. He closed his eyes and waited for the end to come. The battle raged for hours. Keth Oren did not know how long he sat in the engineering bay. Time lost all meaning. The alarms kept screaming. Explosions shook the walls. The red emergency lights painted everything the color of blood. He pressed himself into a corner and tried to make himself as small as possible. At some point, he moved. Not toward the fighting, but away from it. He found a storage compartment deep in the lower levels of the station, far from the sounds of battle. It was dark and quiet, filled with boxes of supplies that no one had touched in months. He crawled inside and closed the door behind him. The fear controlled him completely now. It whispered in his mind, telling him that this was where he belonged. In the dark. In the shadows. Hiding while better creatures did the fighting. This was his nature. This was his fate. He could not change what he was. He curled against the wall and listened to the distant thunder of combat. He heard the screech of metal, the crack of weapons fire, the screams of people dying. Every sound made him flinch. Every explosion made him press harder into the corner. He tried to tell himself that he was useless anyway, that his presence would not make a difference, that he was simply being practical. But the lies tasted bitter in his mouth. He knew what he was. He had always known. The door to the storage compartment slid open. Light flooded in from the corridor. Keth Oren scrambled backward, his claws scraping against the metal floor. For a terrible moment, he thought the Kreth had found him. He thought he was about to die, but it was not a Kreth. It was Katie Morrison. She stumbled into the compartment, her uniform torn and covered in blood. Her left arm hung at a strange angle, clearly broken. Her face was pale with pain, but her eyes were sharp and alert. Behind her, she dragged something heavy. Another body. Keth Oren's breath caught when he saw who it was. Lieutenant Vethran, one of the few other Velothi on the station. He was a proud warrior, one who had looked at Keth Oren's brand with open contempt since the day he arrived. Now he was unconscious, a deep wound in his side leaking blue blood across the floor. "Help me," Katie gasped. Keth Oren found himself moving before he could think. He grabbed Vethran's arms and helped drag him fully into the compartment. The lieutenant was heavy, even for a Velothi. Katie collapsed against the wall, clutching her broken arm. "What happened?" Keth Oren asked. "Kreth breached Deck 7. Katie's voice was strained with pain. "We were trying to get to the secondary command center. got cut off. There were too many of them. She looked at the unconscious Velothi. He took a hit covering my retreat, jumped right in front of me when one of them attacked. Stupid brave fool. Cathorn stared at Vethron. This warrior had despised him, had called him a disgrace to their species, and yet he had risked his life to save a human. A small, soft human who was not even of his own kind. Why would he do that? Cathorn whispered. Katie looked up at him. Her eyes were tired, so tired that there was something fierce in them that refused to dim. Because that's what you do for your people, she said. For your squad. For anyone standing beside you when the darkness comes. She reached for her weapon with her good hand, checking the charge. We're not out of this yet. The Kreth are sweeping the lower decks. We need to move. Move where? Medical Bay is 3 corridors up. If we can get there, they have defenses, survivors. She tried to stand and nearly fell. Her broken arm made every movement agony. But I can't carry him alone. He's too heavy. Cathorn looked at the injured Velothi. He looked at the small human woman who had somehow dragged this massive warrior all the way here by herself. He thought about the Kreth swarming through the station, hunting for prey. Every part of him screamed to stay hidden, to let Katie go alone, to find a deeper hole to crawl into. The fear was so strong he could taste it, cold and metallic on his tongue, but Katie was looking at him. And there was something in her gaze that he had never seen directed at him before. Not pity, not contempt, not the dismissal he had grown used to. She was counting on him. I will help you, he heard himself say. The words surprised him. They felt like they came from someone else, some braver version of himself that he did not recognize. But he said them, and he meant them, and Katie nodded as if she had expected nothing less. Together, they lifted Vethram between them. Cathoran took most of the weight on his shoulder. Katie held her weapon ready in her one good hand and led the way out of the storage compartment. The corridors were dark. Emergency lighting cast everything in shades of red and black. The sound of fighting seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. They moved slowly, carefully, trying not to make noise. They reached the first junction without incident. Katie checked both directions before waving Catherine forward. He followed her, his heart pounding so hard he was sure the Kreth could hear it. Then he saw it. The Kreth drone emerged from a side passage like a nightmare made flesh. It was tall, taller than Catherine, with a body covered in dark chitin plates. It had too many limbs, too many claws, and a head that was nothing but teeth and empty black eyes. It made a sound like a scream and a hiss combined, and it turned toward them. Catherine froze. The fear crashed over him like a wave. He could not move. He could not breathe. He could only stare at the monster that was about to kill them all. Katie fired. The first shot hit the drone in the chest. It staggered but did not fall. The second shot caught it in the head. It collapsed in a heap of twitching limbs. Move, Katie ordered. They pushed forward. Catherine's legs obeyed him, somehow carrying him past the dead drone and down the corridor. The weight of Vethran was crushing, but he did not let go. More drones came. They came in ones and twos, drawn by the sound of weapon fire. Katie killed them, shot after shot, with perfect calm, like she was doing nothing more dangerous than target practice. When her weapon's charge ran out, she threw it at a drone's head and pulled a knife from her boot. Cathoran watched her charge at a creature twice her size. She ducked under its claws, drove her blade into a gap in its armor, and twisted. The drone fell. She pulled her knife free and looked back at him. "You still with me?" she asked. Catherine nodded. He did not trust his voice. They were almost to the medical bay when Katie stumbled. Her broken arm finally betrayed her, sending spikes of pain through her body that she could no longer ignore. She fell against the wall, breathing hard. "Just need a second," she said. Keth Aron looked down the corridor. He could see the door to the medical bay. He could see the lights on the other side, the promise of safety. They were so close. He heard the sound behind them, the clicking of claws on metal. "More Kreth coming. We do not have a second," he said. And then, without thinking, he grabbed Katie around the waist and lifted her up, draping her over his free shoulder like another piece of cargo. She made a sound of surprise, but did not protest. He ran. He ran with two bodies weighing him down, his muscles burning, his lungs screaming for air. The door to the medical bay loomed ahead. He could hear the Kreth behind him. Getting closer, their horrible screams filling the corridor. He hit the door panel with his elbow. The door slid open. He threw himself through and collapsed on the other side, spilling Katie and Vethran onto the floor. Human soldiers slammed the door shut behind him. The Kreth crashed against it, clawing and screaming, but the reinforced metal held. Keth Aron lay on the floor, gasping for breath. Every muscle in his body ached. The fear was still there, coiled in his chest like a living thing, but he had not run away. For the first time in his life, he had run towards safety instead of just for himself. Katie pulled herself up beside him. Her face was gray with pain, but she was smiling. "Not bad," she said. "Not bad at all." Keth Aron did not know what to say, so he just lay there, staring at the ceiling, and wondered what in the stars was happening to him. The medical bay had become a fortress. Survivors had gathered here from all over the station. Soldiers, engineers, cooks, clerks. Anyone who could hold a weapon stood at the reinforced doors. Anyone who could not sat among the wounded. Helping, however, they were able. The lights were dimmed to save power, and the air smelled of blood and medicine. Keth Aron sat against a wall while a human medic checked his injuries. He had cuts he did not remember getting, bruises forming on his scales. Nothing serious. Nothing compared to what others had suffered. Lieutenant Vethran was in surgery. The doctors said he might live if they could stop the bleeding. Katie Morrison was nearby, her arm wrapped in temporary bandages, refusing to lie down while there was work to be done. Lucas Brennan pushed through the crowd and found Keth Aron. The young human's face was smeared with grime and dried blood. His uniform was torn, but he was alive, and he smiled when he saw his friend. "Keth, thank God." Lucas crouched down beside him. "Katie told me what you did, carrying her and Vethran all the way here. That was incredible. I was terrified," Keth Aron said. "The whole time. I wanted to run, but you didn't." Lucas gripped his shoulder. "That's what matters." Before Keth Aron could respond, Commander Megan Price emerged from a back room. She looked like she had aged 10 years in the past few hours. Her uniform was scorched, her silver hair disheveled, and there were dark circles under her eyes. But her voice was steady when she spoke. "Listen up, everyone. I'm not going to lie to you. The situation is bad." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to the commander. "The Kreth have breached multiple decks. We've lost contact with most of our defensive positions. Shield generators are failing." She paused. "And they've reached the main reactor level." A murmur of fear rippled through the crowd. Keth Aron did not fully understand why until Lucas leaned close and explained. "The reactor is what powers everything. Life support, shields, communications. If the Kreth damaged the core, it could explode. Take the whole station with it." Commander Price continued. "Engineering says they can reroute power to the emergency shields, buy us time for coalition reinforcements to arrive. But they need 3 minutes. 3 minutes without any Kreth reaching the core." "3 minutes doesn't sound so bad," someone said. "It wouldn't be," the commander replied, "if we had weapons, ammunition, and a defensible position. We have some of those things. Not enough." She looked around the room. I need volunteers. A small team to go to the reactor level and hold the line while engineering does their work. The silence that followed was heavy. Everyone understood what the commander was asking. A holding action against the Creth swarm was not a battle. It was a sacrifice. It was going to die so that others might live. I'll go, Lucas said. He stood up, his hand still on Catherine's shoulder. I volunteer. Another soldier stepped forward. Then another. Then another. One by one, humans raised their hands. Men and women. Young and old. They knew they would probably die. They volunteered anyway. Cathoran watched them with something like awe. These soft, short-lived creatures, walking toward almost certain death, and not one of them hesitated. Not one of them had to be ordered. They chose. He thought about his homeworld. About the Velothi who had called him worthless. They measured courage by the absence of fear. A true warrior felt no doubt, no hesitation. Fear was weakness. Fear was shame, but these humans were full of fear. He could see it in every face. They were terrified. They just did not let it stop them. Something shifted inside Catharin. Something he did not have a name for. I will go as well, he said. The words came out quiet, but they silenced the room. Everyone turned to look at the Velothi coward with the brand on his chest. Lucas stared at him. Keth, you don't have to. You're not a combat tech. No, Catharin agreed. I am not. But I know the reactor systems. There are junction points that can be sealed manually to slow the Creth down. I can help. Commander Price studied him for a long moment. Her eyes were hard, weighing him, measuring him. You understand what you're signing up for? She asked. Catherine's scales were pale with fear. His hands trembled at his sides. His two hearts were pounding so hard he could feel them in his throat. But he met the commander's eyes and nodded. I understand. The commander held his gaze for another moment. Then she nodded. Get him a weapon. Someone pressed a pistol into Catharan's hands. It felt strange against his claws, too small and too light. He had been trained to use Velothi weapons, not human ones. But it would have to do. The volunteer team gathered near the door. 12 of them in total. 10 humans and 2 Velothi, counting Catharin. The second Velothi was a female named Cyravan, a security officer who had fought her way to the medical bay with a broken leg, and refused to stop fighting. She looked at Catharin with surprise. She had seen his brand. She knew what it meant. You do not have to prove anything to us, she said quietly. I am not trying to prove anything, Catharin replied. I am just trying to help. Cyravan studied him for a moment. Then she nodded, something like respect flickering in her eyes. Then stand beside me. We will face this together. Katie Morrison appeared at the edge of the group. Her broken arm was bound tight against her chest, but she carried a rifle in her good hand. Sergeant, you're wounded, Commander Price said. You should stay here. With respect, Commander, that's not happening. Katie's voice was calm but firm. These are my people. I'm going with them. The commander did not argue. She knew better. Lucas fell into step beside Catharin as they moved toward the door. You know, I'm glad you're coming. Why? I am still terrified. I may run when the fighting starts. Lucas grinned at him, that same easy smile he always wore. Then we'll run together. That's what friends do. Friends. Catharin had never had a friend before. The word felt strange in his mind, strange but warm. Like something he had been missing without knowing it. The doors opened. The team moved out into the dark corridors. Somewhere ahead, the Creth were waiting. Somewhere ahead, death was waiting. Catharin walked toward it with humans at his side. He was still afraid. The fear had not gone anywhere. It sat in his chest like a cold stone, making every step harder than the last. His body screamed at him to turn back, to hide, to survive. But he kept walking. He did not know if that made him brave. He did not know if it made him anything at all. But for the first time in his life, he was choosing. Not letting the fear choose for him. Not letting his instincts control him. He was choosing to fight. And somehow, that choice felt more important than whether he lived or died. The reactor level was 3 decks down. The team moved in silence, weapons ready, eyes scanning every shadow. The sounds of the Kreth grew louder as they descended. Clicking claws. Hissing breaths. The occasional scream of something that was not quite alive and not quite dead. Katie took point. Lucas stayed close to Ketharin. The other soldiers spread out in formation, covering every angle. They were walking into hell. And Ketharin walked with them, because that was what you did for your people. For your squad. For anyone standing beside you when the darkness came. He finally understood. The reactor level was a nightmare. The Kreth had already torn through most of the defenses. Bodies lay scattered across the floor, human and alien alike. The walls were scarred with claw marks and weapon burns. Emergency lights flickered on and off, casting everything in shades of red and black. The team moved forward in formation. Katie led them through corridors that grew narrower and darker with every step. The sound of the Kreth was everywhere now, echoing off the metal walls, making it impossible to tell how many there were or where they were coming from. They found the first junction point near the outer ring of the reactor complex. Ketharin rushed to the control panel while the others took defensive positions around him. "How long?" Katie asked. 1 minute to seal this section. Ketharin's claws flew across the controls. The systems were damaged but functional. Functional. He could do this. He had to do this. The first wave of Kreth hit them 30 seconds later. They came from 3 directions at once. Drones poured out of the shadows, their claws clicking against the floor, their eyeless heads turning toward the warm bodies that had dared to enter their territory. The humans opened fire. The noise was deafening. Pulse rifles screamed. Drones shrieked and fell. The air filled with smoke and the smell of burning chitin. Ketharin forced himself to focus on the controls. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely type. Behind him, he could hear the battle raging. He heard Lucas shouting commands. He heard Katie's rifle barking again and again. He heard Syrvan's war cry as she charged a drone that got too close. The junction sealed. One section of the corridor slammed shut, cutting off a stream of Kreth reinforcements. "Done," Ketharin called out. "We need to move to the next point." "Fall back," Katie ordered. Controlled retreat. Nobody gets left behind. They fought their way to the second junction. 2 soldiers fell on the way, dragged down by drones that came from the ceiling. A third was wounded but kept fighting, holding a pistol in one hand while the other pressed against a wound in her stomach. Cathar reached the second control panel. This one was more damaged. He had to reroute 3 systems before he could even access the seal controls. The Kreth kept coming. Lucas fought beside him now, standing guard while Ketharin worked. The young human's rifle was nearly empty. He had switched to short, precise bursts, making every shot count. "Almost there," Ketharin said. "Take your time." Lucas fired twice more. 2 drones dropped. Well, actually, maybe hurry a little. Despite everything, Ketharin felt something that might have been a laugh trying to escape his throat. He pushed it down and focused on the work. The second junction sealed. 2 more, he reported. "We need to reach the main core access." The team pushed forward. They were down to 8 now. 8 people standing between the Kreth and the destruction of everything they were fighting to protect. The reactor core hummed somewhere ahead of them, a deep thrumming sound that Ketharin could feel in his bones. The third junction was in a wide chamber just outside the core. When they arrived, they found that the Kreth had already begun trying to tear into the reactor's outer shell. Dozens of drones swarmed over the surface, clawing at the metal, trying to breach the containment. "Clear them out," Katie ordered. The battle that followed was the worst yet. The Kreth fought like cornered animals, throwing themselves at the defenders with mindless fury. The humans fought back with everything they had. Rifles, pistols, knives, fists. Anything that could hurt, anything that could kill. Katharan worked at the junction controls with blood, running down his arm from a wound he did not remember receiving. A drone had gotten too close, slashed at him before Sci-Fi brought it down. The pain was distant, unimportant. The only thing that mattered was finishing the job. The third junction sealed. "One more," he said. "The main access corridor." But the path ahead was blocked. A wave of Kreth stood between them and the final junction, more than they could possibly fight through. Katie stared at the massive enemies with grim eyes. "We hold here," she said. "Keth, how close do you need to get?" "The control panel is 20 meters down that corridor. Then we make a path." Katie turned to the survivors. "Everyone with ammunition on me. We punch through, give Keth time to work, then hold the line until engineering finishes the reroute." The soldiers formed up. 6 humans, 1 Valathi, 1 technician who had never wanted to be a warrior. "I should go with the main group," Katharan said. "I can fight." "You can fix things," Katie corrected. "That's more important right now. We'll get you to that panel. You seal the corridor. Then we hold until the shields come up." "And if they do not come up in time?" Katie met his eyes. "Then we held the line as long as we could." That's all anyone can ask. She was not lying to him. She was not pretending they would all survive. She was simply stating a truth that the humans seemed to understand in their bones. Some things were worth dying for. Some battles were worth fighting even when you knew you could not win. Katharan said. "Thank you. For everything." She smiled, and for a moment she looked almost peaceful. "Save it for after. We're not done yet." They charged. The humans crashed into the Kreth line like a wave against rocks. They fought with a fury that seemed impossible for such fragile creatures. Lucas was in the front, his rifle empty now, swinging it like a club. Sci-Fi roared beside him, her claws tearing through chitin with every strike. Katie moved through the chaos like water, her knife finding gaps in Kreth armor with deadly precision. Katharan ran. He ran through the path they had made for him, his heart pounding, his lungs burning. Claws slashed at him. He ducked, dodged, kept moving. A drone lunged at his face, and he shot it with his pistol. The first time he had ever fired a weapon at a living creature. He reached the control panel. His hands moved on their own, guided by years of training and practice. The systems were badly damaged. Half the circuits were fried. But he could make it work. He had to make it work out behind him. He heard screaming. Humans screaming. Kreth screaming. The sounds of people dying to buy him time. He did not look back. He could not look back. If he looked back, he would freeze. If he looked back, the fear would win. The junction seal activated. Emergency bulkheads slammed down across the corridor, cutting off the flood of Kreth reinforcements. The drones trapped inside suddenly found themselves surrounded, outnumbered, facing humans who had nothing left to lose. 1 minute later, it was over. The last drone fell. The survivors stood among the bodies, gasping for breath, covered in wounds that they had not yet felt. Katharan turned to count them. 6 had made it. Katie was leaning against a wall, her knife still in her hand, blood running from a cut above her eye. Lucas was on the ground, one hand pressed against his face. Sci-Fi stood guard over 2 wounded soldiers, refusing to lower her claws. And then the lights changed. Red became blue. The alarms stopped screaming. The intercom crackled. Shields at full power. Coalition reinforcements have arrived. All remaining Kreth forces are being eliminated. All hands, stand down. Nobody cheered. They were too exhausted to cheer. They simply sank to the ground, leaned against walls, and breathed. Katie limped over to Cathoran. She looked at him for a long moment, then slowly extended her good hand. "Not bad for a technician," she said. Cathoran took her hand. Her grip was weak with exhaustion, but there was warmth in it. Warmth and something else. Respect. "I was terrified the entire time," he admitted. "We all were." Katie smiled. "That's what courage is, Keth. Being terrified and doing it anyway." The reinforcements arrived an hour later. Medics rushed through the station, collecting the wounded, counting the dead. Cathoran sat in the corridor outside the reactor room and watched them work. His wounds had been treated. His body was exhausted, but his mind was strangely clear. Lucas sat down beside him. The young human had lost an eye in the final battle. A bandage covered half his face, but he was still smiling. "So," Lucas said, "what do you think of humanity now?" Cathoran considered the question. He thought about Katie, fighting with a broken arm. He thought about the soldiers who had charged into certain death without hesitation. He thought about Lucas, who had called him a friend even when he had done nothing to deserve it. "I think," he said slowly, "that I understand now why your species has survived so long." "Yeah? Why's that?" Cathoran looked at the humans around him. These soft, fragile, impossibly stubborn creatures who refused to give up no matter the odds. "Because you taught me something that my own people never could," he said. "Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the choice to act despite it. You do not fight because you are not afraid. You fight because there are things worth more than fear." Lucas nodded slowly. "That's pretty wise. I learned it from you." They sat in silence for a while, watching the aftermath of the battle. Eventually, Katie joined them, lowering herself carefully onto the floor with a groan of pain. "Commander Price wants to see you," she told Cathoran. "Something about a commendation for bravery." Cathoran touched the brand on his chest, the mark of cowardice that he had carried for so long. "I do not feel brave. Neither do any of us." Katie leaned her head back against the wall. "That's the secret, Keth. We're all just scared people doing the best we can." Cathoran looked at the two humans beside him, at the friends he had never expected to find, at the people who had shown him a different way to live.